Our nation's forests are increasingly being used to produce renewable domestic energy. The use of wood from forests, often called forest biomass, for energy presents some policy challenges. In some states, renewable energy standards, or renewable electric standards, set aggressive targets for the percentage of the energy supply that comes from renewables. Use of forest biomass for energy will be essential for meeting these targets. At the national level, renewable energy proposals also rely on forest biomass for production of energy and fuel, in some cases substantial amounts. One attraction of forest bioenergy is that in comparison to other potential renewables, biomass energy technology is readily available and relatively inexpensive. Forest biomass supply studies indicate there's significant amounts of material available for the energy market. All this interest in utilizing forest biomass for energy raises serious concerns from the public, forest managers, and scientists about ecological and atmospheric carbon effects. Since the characteristics of our nation's forests vary so widely, any effective policy solution must consider each forest type specifically. Policies that treat all forests the same are doomed to failure. In the U.S., most private forest policy is set at the state level, though, in the past, federal policy has influenced states to set regulations or voluntary guidelines. The most notable example is the Federal Clean Water Act, which resulted in the development of best management practices to protect water quality in all 50 states. However, when the current best management practices were developed, they did not consider the increased removal of forest biomass that new markets and policies are encouraging. Therefore, some states have moved forward to enhance their forest management rules or recommendations to include details specific to biomass harvest. There is more work to be done, however, because some states have not yet addressed the forest management policy implications of biomass markets and policies. Moreover, not all state guidelines for biomass harvests provide the kind of measurable targets that are needed to ensure sustainability. The Forest Guild's Biomass Retention and Harvesting Guidelines were designed and developed to help meet the challenges of an expanding biomass market. Specifically, increased biomass harvesting raises concerns about how much we can remove from the forest without damaging soils and wildlife habitat. If the tops and limbs that were formerly left to rot and return nutrients to the soil are now removed in a biomass harvest, will there be a detrimental effect to forest soils? Ecological studies reveal the importance of dead and dying trees to wildlife and biological diversity. If biomass policy creates markets for these trees, will too many of them be removed? Biomass harvest in one or two areas is unlikely to be a big concern for policymakers, but large plants could increase harvests across the entire landscape and require policymakers' attention. The carbon impacts of using forest biomass for energy are also important, particularly because one reason to use wood for energy is to mitigate climate change. Many policymakers and scientists are asking how harvesting and burning forest biomass affect the atmospheric carbon balance, and ask, can it help us meet our climate change objectives? Much of this debate will be answered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but there are also useful resources at the state and regional level for policymakers right now. Any effective public policy for forest biomass must address these ecological concerns in a way that is clear and measurable, while still being cost-effective and operationally practical for foresters and loggers in the woods. That is why the Forest Guild guidelines integrate the best available science for specific forest types with the practical knowledge and experience of foresters working in these forests. The guidelines offer measurable targets that provide assurances that ecological values of the forest are protected, while at the same time providing enough flexibility to account for varying conditions and different management objectives encountered in the forest. These guidelines are intended to be useful for enhancing state-level best management practices, for national policy discussions over biomass energy, and for biomass facilities interested in publicly demonstrating the sustainability of their product. A number of states have already begun to use the Forest Guild's guidelines as a resource as they develop or revise their own biomass harvesting recommendations. Policies that encourage the appropriate and sustainable use of forest biomass will let our forests produce renewable energy, provide jobs and income to rural communities, all while they continue to provide wildlife habitat, clean water and beautiful landscapes.